Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Power of Man podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. I know you know that. Folks, I just like to remind myself of how grateful I am to be sitting in this chair. Folks, if you're not out there doing what you're doing, if you're not out there liking and sharing and subscribing and sending me all the DMs and everything that you do, I don't get to sit here and have this conversation. I don't get to do this for a living. I don't get to live the life of my dreams. So it is all 100% up to you, which is why we bring on these fantastic guests for you, like we have today. Folks, thank you for being here, and thank you for who you are and what you do for us. If you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, well, then that means you know what time it is, and we got to do a really quick little read because, hey, I got to take a sip of my preferred beverage. Man, that's better every time. And you guys all know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up and check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew an absolutely fantastic cup of Joe. It's a lean bean, and folks, you know how much I love it. I drink it all day long on all of my recordings. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, including supporting veterans, which is huge to us here at this show and Power Man. Folks, if you're a veteran out there, I want to thank you and your family for your sacrifice and for what you've done. If you're not out there doing what you're doing, well, I don't get to even have a voice in this country anymore, and we're going to actually talk a little bit about that today. I think I've been had people try to shut me down for the last 6 years, and they haven't yet. So we'll see where we're going to go. But folks, Freedom Hill Coffee feels this way too, and that's why they're here, and that's why they love you. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram, look them up, check them out, and tell them Power of Man sent you. Now, before I get into this intense conversation with this young buck across the table from me, I need one more sip of this high octane deliciousness. All right, I'll be drinking it through the whole thing, folks. Here we go. Welcome to the show, the author of Voice of the Heart, The Battle for Your Purpose, Peace, and Passion, Greg Pye. Greg, how you doing, brother?
Hey Rory, how are you? I love the relationship between the coffee and the illustration of your wife. I think my wife was made there too. I would be having a cup of Freedom Hill as well. I'm definitely an endorsee, but I am at my 4 cup limit today, so I will be enjoying it vicariously through you. Great
Right
coffee
on.
though, folks.
Right
Yeah.
on. I can't let my wife hear this episode now. She's going to be like, hey, he can hold it to 4 cups. How come you can't? Oh my gosh, I do 4 cups before I even like walk around in the morning. But
Yeah.
no, I love that. I really do. I'll tell you what, Greg, this is some really, really intense and interesting stuff we're going to get into today. Before
Mm,
we do, let everybody know kind of where it's coming from. Who is Greg Pye? What are you
mm.
about? And how'd this whole thing get started with you?
Yeah, thank you, Rory. So let me grab the imagination of your listeners for a second. Imagine a puzzle, one of those 10,000 piece puzzles. You go and you buy it, and the box cover's missing. There's no picture. Well, that was the story of my life for a long time. Many people may be able to relate to that. In that box were pieces that spanned poverty and wealth, diversity across race, ethnicity, culture, faith. I was raised by a single parent and then folded into a complex blended family, just like one of those pieces. And I never fit really into anywhere quite comfortably. And yet, that isolation turned out to be a gift. It gave me this ability to see the world differently. This kind of interesting phenomenon. We see a lot of successful people. Part of their success was because they were ostracized when they were young, which gave them separation from sort of the worldly influences, allowed them to develop a little bit more indigenously. We're going to talk about that today, but I'm not suggesting that's the brilliant way to grow up. But for me, that accident caused me to notice patterns that most people can't see. From that time, as a young buck, I was curious, George. I mean, I there wasn't anything I wasn't interested in or didn't try. I had experience as an accomplished musician by the time I was 15, a commercial photographer. I went on eventually, in spite of suffering through school. I could barely get out of school and went to many colleges, didn't graduate from any of them. But I did go on to build successful careers at the highest levels in business consulting, technology, law, media and entertainment, and global entrepreneurship. And most recently, or over the last couple of decades, in finance and on Wall Street. That's like a cat with 15 lives, and I've lived all of them. But again, that coupled with the ability to see patterns and working with global leaders, people who are recognizable and household names in these respective industries, I started to, feel like something was missing in spite of the success. I once said to somebody, you can fail in failing. And I was doing that. And I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put my name on it until one particular day in 2012.
All right. I think I know where we're going here only because I've had the opportunity to read your bio a little bit. But one particular day in 2012 sounds like this was pretty significant in this transformation of yours.
Yeah. I had been doing some work over in developing parts of the world, Africa, North Africa, what they call the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa, Middle East, and then into Southeast Asia. And I was working basically, I was really donating my time and resources and network to helping indigenous people cultivate businesses that were scalable, that would, number one, provide employment, local community employment in much needed places, as well as necessary or needed goods and services, or it's goods and services that the community could benefit from, and particularly even as an exporting possibility. I wanted to give people new purpose in that respect. I wasn't fully understanding all of what it could do, but it did have impact. And I was really loving it. And I was another part of it is I was doing it with my wife. She doesn't, she had been sort of retired from her uh, job, but there's something about family and connection that amplifies whatever you're trying to do in your life. It just makes it easier and more powerful. And again, we're going to talk about some of that as well. But we were in Kenya, in the Masai Mara region, which is on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. We were on our way to visit a schoolhouse. This is one of these one-room schoolhouses. I was actually bringing my cameras to show the children what this technology called photography looked like and what it could do. It was fascinating to them. They would look at take a picture of them and show them on the back of the camera, and they would just their minds would be blown. But what I was really trying to do is get them to focus on the awesomeness of creation through the lens. See, again, all these things in the box, all these puzzle pieces started to form a picture. Part of the pattern recognition was knowing that sometimes, our grand design, the ability to see peripherally and take in as much as we can, like we just can't get enough of everything around us, is actually quite distracting and detrimental. The beauty about a camera is you're looking through an eyepiece and through a lens, and so your peripheral vision is cut off, and it allows you to focus on what it is you're looking at. And I wanted them just to look through the lens or look at the back and stare at it and look at the awesomeness of what they were witnessing. So back to the circumstance, we were on our way to that schoolhouse, and there was a sunset, and it was falling on top of a acacia tree in the distance. And my wife said, "You got to take this picture." And I'm thinking, "Oh God, not another sunset, please, honey." But again, having been married for 26, 27 years, I should know the exact number, right? Um, Wives are often right when you're wrong, and you don't know you're wrong yet. So I lean into her suggestions often. So I did so, and I got the camera framed, and this is really phenomenal because I got the camera framed, and I'm looking through it, and I said, "Yeah, it actually looks better not through the camera. I mean, just taking it all in." But I'm looking at it, and my son was with us, and he was 11 or 12 at the time. He decides what a 11 or 12-year-old would do is that's jump in front of dad's camera when he's getting ready to take a picture. But when he did that, I shifted the camera up. And in doing that, if you know anything about, lenses, the apertures, the blades kind of crisscross each other, and it made the sun burst in a way. You can kind of see the image on the cover of the book here, but to
Right. Yeah.
appreciate it, it's actually an image that's been all over the world now. It's traveled in galleries. It's called the Tree of Light. That picture was taken, but after I took it, we were flying back, and I'm looking at it. And from the time we flew back, for a couple of weeks, I was troubled by it. It had nothing to do with the beauty. It had to do with something that was really probably the picture that finally formed on my puzzle box. And that was that everything in all of creation, everything on this earth and beyond, seems to have a cycle of purpose and fulfillment. Even when we create something, like, a device, an instrument, an invention. We create it with purpose and to fulfill an objective, a market or a solution, if you will. There was one thing that did not actually fall into that pattern, and that was humanity itself. I saw that humanity was in a cycle of destruction. It was basically just trying to survive. Things that we were calling progress was being normalized, but really we were becoming, less and less of what we were meant to be. I mean, an example is how we communicate today. We're basically back to the future. We communicate with hieroglyphics, emojis. Think about that. Like stone pictures on the stone wall, we're back to that, except using a device.
Yeah.
And this troubled me, but then it like literally drove a rivet through my heart because I realized that this was as much about humanity as it was about myself. I finally crashed and burned all the success. And I know a lot of people can relate to this. I say there's two types of people out there, Rory. There's those folks who, let's just say, are suffering. They're suffering physically, emotionally, mentally, financially. And then I say, then there's everybody else that doesn't know they're suffering yet. And this really formed into what became the voice of the heart.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Love that.
heavy duty.
I love that. I'm
And hearing
starting to wonder
voices.
where I am. I'm like, okay, I wonder which one of those I kind of fall into. Maybe a little bit of both, but
Yeah.
the voice of the heart. For I've had the opportunity to look over the book, look over your a lot of the excerpts from it and things like that. Folks who have not seen this yet, tell them what can they expect if they go pick this book up. They start leafing through it. I mean, it's not a light read for sure, but it's incredibly powerful. Tell everybody a little bit about what the book is.
So let me bridge to that by saying that
Sure.
from that whole experience, I started drafting notes. It started to be dozens of pages, then hundreds, and then thousands of pages. And I also started speaking. I was doing some radio shows, some podcasts, and I was talking about this thing called the voice of the heart. I wasn't quite sure exactly. It was literally forming while I was talking about it, but I knew it was about these voices. Now, you might say, some people in your audience might be saying, "Oh boy, this guy needs a psychiatrist." But the truth be told, we do hear voices. We know the caricature of the angel and the devil on our shoulders. We know that we have conscious voices. We have unconscious voices. We have voices around us. We have people who influence us. We have mentors. We have family and educators. We have the media. So there are voices out there. But the voices I was talking about was the noise, which is the voice of the world, and that's basically everything and anything that's really obvious to us. And it's so obvious that it's normalized. Like things that shouldn't be normal are normalized. Like case in point, what I just mentioned earlier, sending an emoji to somebody to say you love them is not normal. It's not how we're designed to connect and love on somebody. But this was the voice of the world. It was basically what we were living in. But the alternative was this thing called the voice of the heart. And the voice of the heart is a whisper. Now, some of you might say, well, that's a spiritual thing, isn't it? Now, for me, it is. I'll be very candid, and I'm happy to talk about that. But one thing I don't do, and one thing I don't believe, is I don't believe in imposing what I believe on anybody else. And the
Yeah.
whole book is framed that way. It's not designed to tell you how to think, it's designed to remind you that you're actually capable of thinking. So when people say, well, Greg, the cover, it's this thing, this sunset, feels very religious to me. And I'm going to run for the hills. I say, no, wait a second. There's an invisible war, which is how I characterize it. And that invisible war, which happens to be, by the way, chapter 1 of the book. So we're segueing into the book itself. That invisible war is denominated however you want to think about it. So what can't we deny? So for a religious person, let's say for a Christian or a Catholic or anybody in the sort of Christian denominations, they may say there's Satan, there's good and evil, there's Satan and God, even though they're not equals. Satan represents all things that are not, good for us and
Sure.
our tendencies and sin and whatnot, right? But let's take it out of the religious spectrum. We all know there is still good and evil. We know there's good and bad. We know there is joy and just comfort. Now, to go back to something that you said when you were kind of debating where you were, I did say something, and I wasn't being coy about it. There are people who are suffering, and there's people who don't know they are suffering.
Right.
There's something very extraordinary about success. It has such an uncanny way of layering on top of pain and burying anything that is still rearing its ugly head in our lives, but distancing ourselves from it. And so that's what I refer to. And so the invisible war is that very thing. For some of us, we can actually see it. But what the Voice of the Heart book does is it lays down a foundation first, and then it takes you on a journey through every system in society. There's 12 of them, and it actually relates to something called the tree of life metaphor. Again, back to this puzzle just forming a perfect picture. And it shows you how the enemy, whoever you may think that is operating in all of society and separating humanity from its potential, as well as you from your purpose, peace, and passion, which are what I call the command centers. So when somebody picks up this book, they're going to learn four things right off the bat, chapters 1 through 4. Number one, there's an invisible war, and it's on humanity, and it's also on you. You don't have to agree with it right away. You just have to be open to reading more and understanding what exactly is the picture. What does this invisible war look like? And you got to be prepared. There is one warning. There's a Surgeon General sticker on the box. It says that you have to be prepared to look in the mirror. And that's very hard for most of us. Most of us don't go there until we actually crash and burn. But why would we wait until that when we have the opportunity to actually look in the mirror and say, you know what, this is something that I can fix. This is something I should do. This is something that would bring me joy.
Hmm.
So the first chapter is the invisible war. It takes you through how I discovered it and how you may too. The second chapter is an interesting, such a spin on life. So we're in a self-help conundrum. There's everybody. I mean, it's a we're going to probably breach $1 trillion industry at some point globally. It
Sure.
is huge and it's growing. Why? Because everybody needs help. I'm not going to knock the self-helpers, the advocates, the social workers, the authors. Most of them have the right heart. Most of them are trying to fix something. What I am going to say is that self-help doesn't work in a broken world. There's something that I created. And by the way, the opposite, the antithesis of self-help is self-sacrifice. And how many people do we know that do that? I was kind of like that. Just give so much of yourself, you have nothing. There you go. Amen.
Oh yeah.
So what is the real way we're designed? We're designed for something I call selfless help. So let me first give you an illustration of what that looks like. Think about a Ferris wheel. If you're at the bottom of a stuck Ferris wheel, you can be thankful, but you can never ride that Ferris wheel again until the people at the top are brought safely down. Think of the Ferris wheel as a system in society. Now, what that's suggesting is that when we fix problems that we have in a way that fixes problems for the multitudes, for other people that share that problem, we create lasting consequence. This is not anything new or brilliant, except that I put it in a can. I've made it so that people can understand it. And this is how, again, whoever you want to call the enemy works. On the airplane, the flight attendant tells you when the mask drops down, put it over your face first,
Right.
and then put it over the person next to you or the child next to you. It's so nuanced that we think, hey, that makes sense.
Right.
But what they're not telling you is the only reason you're putting the mask on yourself first is so that you have a responsibility for those who cannot take care of themselves on that plane. You hear the tonality, you hear the difference,
Mm-hmm.
and Madison Avenue doesn't push that. They push just do it, me only, and everything else. And so we are conditioned to say, even if we want to be helpful, even if we're got the biggest hearts in the world, we're still not doing it right. Let me give you another case in point. My own reflection, my own mirror. I had been a giver my whole life. So if I had $10 in my wallet, I'm giving you 12. And then I realized I wasn't helping anybody. I have a saying. Part of it, I'm leveraging a very known adage. Don't give a man a fish. Don't teach a man a fish. First, ask him if he even wants fish. Yeah.
That's left out of the equation
And
very often.
that's a mic drop. Because let me tell you something. When I was giving, I wasn't giving for the person receiving. I was giving for me. And we all do that because we're not, it's not our fault. We shouldn't beat ourselves up, but that's a conditioning of society. It's so important that we try to understand one another. And there's a reciprocal of this, and I call it the stuck jar. So there are people who are selfless givers. They just give all of themselves. And they end up becoming valueless to themselves and to the world because they're just depleted. So, what is the stuck jar principle? And it's in the book. You ever have a stuck jar
Oh yeah.
lid,
Mhm.
and you're crashing on the corner of the counter, and you can't get it open, and then your 6-year-old comes over and just finesses it and
Sure.
opens it up.
Right.
So the idea of the stuck jar principle is that sometimes we're the wrong person for the right job. Now, I can see
That's
it's
fair.
connecting, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll have a person in our life. It could be our mother. It could be a sister or brother. It could be a business friend, a partner, or just a friend who is literally draining us. And we're there for them in a way that's not necessarily helping, in fact, making it worse for them by providing them a crutch, and it's depleting us. And sometimes we need to hand that ball off because our passion, we're going to talk more about passion later, relies on a kindling of fire. It people don't realize, many people don't realize what is available to us in terms of joy on this earth. And I'm hoping to open up that phenomenon so that people are traveling in their lives not without trial and tribulation, but rather with as a victorious, like as a winner, as somebody who is a selfless helper. Think of people, and I'm not gonna, I point to some people in my book only as to kind of spotlight the example, but not to endorse anybody. But if you take whistleblowers over time, take Ed Snowden.
Mhm.
Years ago, people, the government wanted to put him in jail, right? And everyone was like, oh, how could he betray the government and stuff and the NSA? And now we're finding out that he was really trying to save our life. Um, and he risked his own. Now he was a part of the system, and we're going to talk about this in a second too. Then he became so he was a victim of the system, part of the system, and then became a warrior against the system. So the third chapter of the book talks about the infiltration into all of society and the 12 systems, which connect to this thing called the Tree of Light. Now, the Tree of Light is a really interesting sort of phenomenon that came to me while I was really starting to draft the book. I realized that that tree in the distance that I photographed had more meaning than just being beautiful out there and telling me that humanity was a mess and that I was a mess. That, in fact, the 4 parts of the tree were relevant. So I connected them to the 12 systems, 4 parts of the tree, 3 systems for each part. And the way it breaks down is like this. You've got the root systems. They're the formative systems of family dynamics, education, and religion. This is where we expect to be loved. We come into the world, into those systems, and they're basically telling us and designing us the way they want us to be before we can even say our first words. That's how powerful they are. The second set of systems are the trunk systems. So you go from the roots to the trunk. Now, what happens to the trunk? Well, the trunk is dependent on what was fed in the roots. So, however polluted your soil was, the trunk systems are going to leverage that. The trunk systems are influence systems of media and entertainment, news and information, and technology and data. And they all work together, as we know. And what they do is they take whatever our problems were in the soil and they amplify them, make us even more slave to them. The next set of systems are the branch systems, and this is how we find relevance in society. Think of branches that reach out. Now, in a garden or in the woods, in the forest, in the redwoods, trees thrive among one another. In fact, they're even connected underground. The root systems connect to one another to keep them stable. But in our society, we grow branches to try to knock other branches down or to provide shade over the other trees. And those systems are systems of finance, government, and social structures. That's like our work friends or our country club or whatever it is we're a member of. The last set of systems are fruit systems. And I want to really, because I know your audience includes uh, veterans who I am extraordinarily appreciative of, but in a unique way. Because when I was 7, 8 years old, I was reading a book. It's actually back here. It's called The Invisible Government, that exposed the Vietnam War and what was going on in the corporate influence. Think of a 7-year-old not reading, Catcher in the Rye necessarily, but reading that. And I, from a very young age, now we're talking in the 60s, from a very young age, knew that when someone was getting sent off to war, I really was praying that they knew why and where they were going and what was the purpose. Because they should, when one gives their life for their country or for a purpose. So the fourth set of systems are those of the fruit systems. And the fruit systems are about the perpetuation of humanity so that we don't become extinct and so that we don't live in bondage. And those systems are health and wellness, law, order, and justice, and the military industrial complex. Now you can see that tree. I'm going to pause there for you,
Wow.
Rory, for a second. You can see how extraordinary that illustration is, right?
I mean, I read this earlier, and now that you're talking about it and put it in a little more classification, these are things that we're all questioning every day in today's world, I think, in one way or another. When you list them off like that, though, it really does kind of seem like the entire world is attacking you because it's every aspect of our lives.
Right. And that's chapter 3, the infiltration and the interconnection, the sort of contagion among those systems. They are constructed in a way that they are not autonomous, they are connected. Case in point, whenever there's a phenomenon like COVID, for example, for whatever you might think about that situation, it wasn't just a health crisis. It infiltrated every one of the 12 systems, families, education. Okay. It goes through the whole thing,
Yeah.
government, you name it. So the systems are designed to leverage one another and to keep us in separated from that cycle of purpose and fulfillment and the command center fulfillment that we have. Now, we didn't talk fully about that, and that's purpose, peace, and passion. But purpose is our identity. Peace is not the absence of discourse, but the presence of truth. And passion is what drives you, what motivates you. Those are what we're protecting as individuals, right? So those 12 systems are infiltrated in a way that disrupts our thriving in those areas.
Hmm.
The fourth chapter is actually probably the hardest for people to digest. It's the roles that we play in this war. So, and again, I appeal to your veteran audience and your active duty audience to think about this in their lives because they can relate this terminology. So the victim, we are all victims. There's nobody safe from this war. The second role, however, is quite interesting, and that's the role of soldier. Now, when you think of soldier, you think, oh, someone very powerful, and that is true. But in my case, or in the book, it's the soldier is one who ends up supporting the system. So they become an ally of the system, either knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly. What do I mean by that? Okay, so the examples I gave you, there was a case, Frank Serpico, who was a New York police officer. He was an officer. He got into it because he wanted to protect people. He ended up becoming part of a criminal segment of the force, and then at some point, so that's when he was participating and being a part of the problem. And then he woke up to it and became a warrior, which is the third role, which is when we say we're not going to put up with this, we're going to actually play a role in changing it. And if I could segue into sort of a religious context, those of your audience who are, say, Christians or followers of Jesus, they will relate it to the Saul to Paul conversion. It's very well articulated there that you had someone who was a part of a group of people, the Jews, and they were persecuted by the Romans at the time, or under the authority of the Romans. Then he became a tax collector, or not, I'm sorry, not a tax collector, it was Matthew, of course, but he became a warrior for the Romans and putting other Jews to death and Christians. And then he became a follower, and not just any follower. He became the one of the foundational stones of the modern day church. So these 4 chapters are rich. I mean, people. What I found is, I remember when I first published the book, and it was doing very well considering a new release, but I wasn't getting any reviews. And I was like, oh, it's weird. Do people not like it? Then all of a sudden reviews started coming in. I realized that people were spending so much time in the first 4 chapters and going back and back and back, and then finally allowing themselves to journey through the rest of the book.
Okay, so the book itself, it lays out these ideas. You you glossed over this a little at the beginning. I'm going to go back to it and just see if maybe we can get an answer on that. But um, who are we at war with?
Mm. Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting how, let's just call it an enemy right now,
Okay,
generically.
okay,
Okay, because we all have enemies, or we think we do, and we'll point a finger. We'll say, like if you're in politics, if you're political, and I'm apolitical, I don't believe in this system itself because I know what it's about. But if you're a Republican, you may hate Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you may hate Republicans. They're your enemies, right? So I first invite people to accept the notion of the enemy. So who would be an enemy in this particular situation? What the enemy would want is for us to get caught up on the idea of who's the enemy, because the enemy's invisibility is the power of the enemy. In other words, if I'm a Christian and I'm talking about an enemy to a non-Christian, right away the conversation's over. We can't even, so there's the division. We can't even go to square one. So I was aware of this,
hmm,
and which is why this is really a secular phenomenon that can be adapted to any enemy. So the enemy is whoever you think the enemy is. So if you read the book and you come to the conclusion that the education system, so the education chapter focuses on each of the system chapters focus on the kind of infiltration into that and how we can modernize our thinking around it. So if you say, well, they're not really teaching kids to think anymore. Critical thinking is not a right. I mean,
right.
not many people would, and that's why people were going to homeschool. But every form of education has a standardization that's government kind of adapted, and so they all do the same thing at the end, and that is strip children of critical thinking to make them soldiers for whatever purpose. I think most people will agree, varying degrees of that. But then who's the enemy? Well, the enemy could be the system. The enemy could be the educators. The enemy could be the government. Whoever, I don't care who the enemy is, but there's an enemy. There's somebody that's getting in the way of your child
Hmm.
learning to think critically. I have a quote. Today, the last couple of generations, the whole idea at Stanford and all these great schools was, hey, teach your kids to think outside the box. And I would say they can't even find the box.
Yeah, I'm one of those who doesn't think that's really being done anymore, to be honest.
It,
So,
it it's not.
yeah. But I'm very curious on this enemy thing. I understand why you're
Yeah.
framing it that way. Because if you get wrapped up in who is the enemy,
Mhm.
then you really lose a lot of the argument, a lot of the capacity to be able to think it through is gone
Right.
if you're focused on who the problem is instead of what the problem is. So
Exactly.
I get that part. I understand it. Um, in this world of tribalism and social media and everything
Yeah.
else, how do you get that message across? And is that really the focus of the book?
So, and I love that you're kind of staying here for a minute, because This is so if there was an enemy, and there is, that's in the way of this book propagating, getting
Hmm.
into people's homes and hearts, the only gate that there is for that enemy to disrupt that process is at that very question. Is there really an enemy? Do you really have an enemy? Is that enemy spiritual? Is that enemy physical? So again, when I wrote the book, and this is why I actually wrote in like kind of like a vein through the book is my personal story, which in and of itself is pretty extraordinary because I wanted people to see how I got there. I wanted people to see that there was a certain amount of give and take. I had to let go of things in order to hold on to life. And I had to let go of ideas. I had to let go of, even things I thought were the truth. And there was a particular quote that came to me. I wrote it, but it's something that just laid on my heart right away. And it might kind of answer this question in one way or another. And that is that people who search for the truth are more faithful to the truth than those who know the truth. It's deep. So, what does that mean? Well, it came to me, and then I realized, you know what? Socrates had said something very interesting, and that is knowledge is the idea of not knowing anything at all. Something I'm paraphrasing. In other words, if I tell you something, you didn't get any knowledge. And by the way, no one says education is power, they say knowledge is power. But if I tell you
Right.
something and then you tell somebody else, you didn't get any education. I mean, you didn't get knowledge. You got told something. So the journey, the exploration is the answer. It's the alpha of anything we pursue.
Hmm.
So the idea of establishing the enemy, like if someone put my back against the wall and said, "Who is the enemy? I want his name." I'm not going to do that because my Christian beliefs identify that enemy. But even in my Christian beliefs, I do not know. It's a journey of knowing who Satan is. Okay. You get it through scripture and you get it through wise men, but you don't get it by knowing, I know who Satan is. People, priests who do exorcists will tell you when they come in touch with that enemy has no identity. It changes, it morphs, it's so, undefinable. And I'm getting, some people might be frightened by me even going here, but that's the idea. The idea is that labeling the enemy limits the enemy. Labeling the enemy divides us from one another because a common enemy brings people together. Guess what? When have we come together as a society or as a creation, as a humanity? We come together in times of perilous tribulation, like 9/11.
Right.
Everybody for a week loved each other, and then it was over.
Right.
Um, or in some extraordinary circumstance that captures the imagination of all, we come together. This is our nature. And again, we're so far distance from it, we don't recognize that that's the power and who we are and how we've been designed. So a common enemy that is not defined by a name brings us together. Now, we're seeing in politics, the party systems are starting to blur. And why is that? Well, they've always been a blur. But now the general population is starting to see that, wait a second, all politicians lie. Wait a second. It's not this party versus that party. It's us versus them or them versus us. They're starting to see that. Guess what? That's a danger. That collective power and thought is a danger to the system. The name is the gate or the fence. And when you break that down, you create a nuclear fissionable phenomenon because the power of many can do anything on this planet. We are an extraordinary creation. Everyone's getting scared. Artificial intelligence, AI. Yeah, listen, let's stop calling it AI. Let's call it artificial intelligence as a reminder that it is artificial, folks. It's artificial intelligence. It's created by men and women, and it's always going to be artificial. I don't care how smart it gets. It's always going to come from the biases and the programming and the algorithmic genius of mankind. That is the only thing, even in the highest levels of generative AI, it cannot replace this thing. Well, this may be mine, but not yours, Rory.
In theory, yeah, I understand. Let me ask you then, in terms of the book, is the book really to educate folks that this exists, or is it to get them to name their own enemy, or is it to get them to, or is it like actionable steps, on how to sort of confront all of these things? I'm curious the direction of the book so that people know.
Yeah, it's all three. So
Okay.
the book, in its segmentation, the book introduces the, building blocks of the voice of the heart. Then it goes into the 12 systems. Then it talks about the weapons that the enemy employs against us in the infiltration of those systems. And then the last part of the book are three tools that are actually very practical, very easy to use. They take atrophied muscles that we just either not using or haven't used, and they start to literally go to the soil and turn it and make us almost, new creations in a way. And so those tools are the identity map. What that does is you map out the influences in your life. You'll find that there's been things called stacking, horizontal, vertical stacking, oppositional stacking. So what is that? The only reason I'm a Democrat is because I hate Republicans. That's oppositional stacking. Or let's take vertical stacking. My grandfather loves the um, the Hoosiers. I'm going to use the Hoosiers for you. But I live in Los Angeles, so the only reason I love the Hoosiers is because my uncle, my grandfather, whoever it is, I'm associating. And by the way, he also likes to smoke cigars, so I like to smoke. So I've adopted his identity because he's vertical. He's been so influential. I've adopted everything that he is. And then there's horizontal stacking, which is when we sort of become single-minded in particular parts of our life, like maybe music. Like I'm a musician and I love all kinds of music. I play all kinds of music, but many musicians only like one kind of music, or only listen to one kind of music because they like a group of artists, and those group of artists feed that appetite. And so it's not to say that that's a bad thing, but when we do our identity mapping, we look at the degree that these have actually, the question we ask is, wait a second, I've only listened to rock and roll, but do I like country rock? I only listen to hard. Would I like country rock? Maybe I should try to listen to some country rock. So it gets us looking at our identity and unraveling the layers of influence. The second tool is the truth filter. The truth filter optimizes our source of information. It teaches us that certain things, and quite a few, need to be researched ourselves. We've got to stop using two things: social media and ChatGPT. I say that generically. They're good. They're good when they're used as peripheral, but they shouldn't supplant our need to know the truth. And remember what I said about the truth. It's not knowing the truth, it's the pursuit of the truth.
Right.
Okay. It's being the opposite of lazy in the truth, pursuing the truth. So that is a really an interesting, I remember after 9/11, and you know, I was always traveling the world. I was never scared of anywhere. I've been all over. But after 9/11, everyone was like, well, you're going to the Middle East. Oh my God, you're going to get killed. When exactly the opposite would happen. I'd go over there and someone would buy me dinner. I mean, fly into New York, fly into JFK and see if anyone offers you dinner. In fact, see if anyone doesn't try to run you over. Okay.
Right. I've
I
been to
mean,
New York.
yeah, 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 yeah. And look, I love New York. I just came from there. My granddaughter, my new granddaughter's up there. Shout out to Lucy or Lulu. Um, but unless you get on a plane, I used to tell people, get on a plane and go there. Get on a plane. I had this situation with a gentleman. We were opening a gym in Nairobi, Kenya. There was a gentleman in Utah who had a CrossFit gym. He's very successful very highly regarded athlete. Him and his wife. They had three children. Two of them had, I think, autism, light on the spectrum, if you will, but
Mhm.
needed some special assistance. And I said to him, "We're opening a gym in Kenya. Do you think you'd like to go over there and help us operate?" And he's like, "I don't even have my passport." I said, "I'm not going over there. Don't they have bones in their noses and stuff?" I said, "Well, no." Long story short, my wife and I took him on a trip to Africa. We convinced him to go. He got his passport. He went, and then we went up to North Africa. He met some interesting relationships in health and wellness. A year later, he moved his entire family out there and created this amazing scalable gym system that's all throughout Africa now. What do you know? So truth is really important, but we have to understand that none of us really know truth in its absolute form.
Yeah.
But pursuing the truth is the way we're designed. And then lastly is the passion builder. Passion builder, I use the passion builder. Passion builder kind of cuts to what I was talking about earlier. You start to inventory the people and the things in your life, and you find that certain things are draining and certain things are lighting your fire. And you're not, it would surprise you to know that the things that light you on fire, you're not allocating enough resource to,
Okay.
time, attention. And the things that are draining you, you're buried in it. A lot of professionals get there. A lot of people who have very demanding jobs, who are making a lot of money, let's say doctors, lawyers, and others, who are very good at what they do, but very unhappy at what they're doing. I find that so many of them were loved music, loved art, wanted to build something, wanted to start a business, and they never gave it the attention. They get to that point in life and they're saying, well, what am I going to do now? But I've had a good life because I've made all this money and I have a house and I'm taking care of all my children, which is the great, failure that we just hide our potential under layers and layers of dirt.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just with the 12 subjects that you have in here, you and I were kidding around. I thought we were kidding around before the interview about how you could come on, 12 different times and have these different conversations. And right now I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't even gotten into this or this or this, and I'm already running out of time. So,
Yeah.
it's the type of thing that you could delve into each one of these topics for an hour easily, and start talking about what happens with them. Um, if you could, kind of leave the viewers with like one thing that you hope they get out of this book, well, what is that?
Well, the closing, so there's two quotes in the book. One is the opening line,
Yeah.
and the other is the closing line. The opening line is, when the snake moved in the garden, there went the neighborhood. The closing line is, when you are all out of hope, the only thing left is hope. People are struggling. I know people at every end of every spectrum, of every denomination, of every condition, of every socioeconomic. I've been blessed to be able to write a book because of the experiences I've had and the connections to all kinds of people. And I struggle to find people. I find myself, I got to tell you, I got to be honest with you, Rory, writing this book. So it took 13 years, 500 pages, and it's a whole ecosystem, as you know. It's now got the 30 children's illustrated books that go chapter for book,
Yeah.
hand in hand, so parents and children can start to raise them children aware and present. Um, but it was very weighty for me. It still is to this day. My wife will sometimes look at me and say, we're watching a movie that we love, and I love her from here to eternity, and I love being with her. But I'll look like I got something on my mind, and it's always this. It's always the pain and suffering that's around us, and it's ironically, it's not even the obvious pain and suffering. It's the ones that I see when I can look into people's eyes, and it crushes me. So I want people to know that if I could give this book to them, if I could literally just mail it to them, I would do it in a second, in a heartbeat. And if you reach out to me at info@voiceoftheheartbooks.com, I'd be happy to talk to you or send you something, send you a book or whatever. But buy it, get it, share it, ask me for it. I don't care, but I want to be helpful. And I've been given this instrument, and I feel like it's been entrusted to me. So my objective is to give people the three parts of this book, which is the mirror, the map, and then the megaphone, to create a movement where we can all kind of it's look, we don't defeat this enemy. The war will rage on, but we can thrive. We can live better than we're living today. Far better, far better. The bar is so low. You just have to turn on the news or go on X or whatever if you can digest it for 5 seconds, or just at work. The experience in a job, like people don't care anymore. And I don't blame them, but I do blame them for not trying to pull themselves out of it. You don't, when you're in the trench, don't bring the shovel with
All of these little things you say, like takes a second, and then you go, oh yeah, because it makes the trench deeper.
you.
No,
Yeah,
I
there you
love
go.
it. I really
Yeah.
do. All right, Greg, I love this, and like I said, I could talk to you for hours about this. Any chance you'd be open to coming back on the show?
I will, in fact, I'm just going to stay on this Zoom, and whenever you decide to come back in July or whatever, I'll be here. Just light it up. Uh,
Sounds great.
Absolutely, Rory. You're a blessing to your audience, and especially to the vets out there who I know you served in a particular manner, but really everybody. We're all vets. We're all vets in this war, and that's we need to join arms in this and pull ourselves up.
Love that. All right. So one more time, how can everybody reach you, find out more about you, all that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah, so you can email me at info at voice of the heart books. Again, voice of the heart books, plural.com. You can also go onto Amazon, and you don't have to buy the book. You can go on, actually, Amazon and Goodreads run a lot of, I think Goodreads is actually running a free book special. Amazon runs free downloads. It's a Kindle Unlimited, so you can download it for free if you're on Kindle Unlimited. I just want you to have it. But if you go to the listing, so Voice of the Heart Books, Greg Pye, you just put my name in there just to make sure you get it. Read about, there's a pretty good description of what is in the book, and you can read a couple of pages in it and just start to get your feet wet in it. So that's the best ways to, or you can call me and I'll give you my phone. No, but I would, I
I got it.
would.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. All right, Greg, thank you, man, for coming on here and just for talking about the book, for exposing everybody to these ideas, sharing your thoughts, and I mean, for building this entire platform with the
Thank you.
the many books and everything you're building. It's very clear that you're just out here to kind of help, and you want to spread this knowledge and spread the word. And I hope people get out there and pick this book up. Thank you for coming on and sharing all that, brother.
Thank you, Rory.
All right,
Thank you, your
folks.
audience.
It's been an absolutely wonderful episode of the Power Man podcast, folks, and I could sit here and talk to Greg for quite a bit longer. We have a lot more to cover, but we'll see if we can't cajole him into coming back on and maybe diving into some of these topics a little bit more specifically. But in the meantime, go out and grab the book. The reason we bring these powerful men on here with these powerful messages is because we are absolutely united in hoping that you find your power so that you can become a better provider, better protector, a better leader tomorrow than you are today, so that you can become a better father, a better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we want that for you is because you have value. It's because you matter. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.